The hallway felt longer than usual that evening, stretching out in a quiet way that made Claire Miller slow her steps without knowing why, the laundry basket warm against her arms as she walked through the house she had lived in for 8 years, a house that usually felt safe and familiar but now seemed filled with pauses and echoes, and as she moved past framed family photos and the faint smell of dinner still hanging in the air, she noticed something small that immediately caught her attention: the door at the end of the hall, slightly open, just enough to let light spill into the corridor, and it took her a moment to realize it was Ethan's room, her stepson's room, a space she rarely entered unless invited, because boundaries had always mattered in this blended family, especially since Ethan had returned home after college, older now, quieter, carrying the weight of decisions he hadn't fully figured out yet. And Claire respected that distance, she truly did, which was why she stopped walking when she saw the door, her instincts telling her to turn back, to leave the folded shirts on the table, to let him collect them later, but the house was silent, David wasn't home yet, and she told herself it was harmless, just a simple task, nothing more, yet as she took one step closer, she heard a sound that didn't belong to silence, a low laugh, soft and genuine, the kind that slips out when someone feels relaxed and unguarded, and it caught her off balance, because she realized she hadn't heard Ethan laugh like that in a long time, not since he was younger, not since life had started pressing down on him, and without meaning to, she paused again, her heart doing something strange, quick and uneven, and she should have knocked then, she knew that, she had taught herself that habit long ago, but the door was already open, and the moment felt ordinary enough to ignore caution, so she stepped forward and gently pushed it wider, and the room revealed itself in a way that felt almost intimate, sunlight fading through the window, posters half removed from the walls, boxes stacked near the closet, signs of someone halfway between staying and leaving, and there was Ethan, sitting near the bed, phone in his hand, his shoulders relaxed, his voice mid-sentence before it stopped short when he looked up and saw her, and in that instant, something changed, not dramatically, not loudly, but in a quiet way that settled deep in Claire's chest, because Ethan didn't just look surprised, he looked exposed, like she had seen a version of him that wasn't meant for anyone else, and neither of them spoke right away, the air stretching thin between them, her mind racing with apologies she hadn't yet said, his hand lowering the phone as if the conversation on the other end had suddenly become unimportant, and Claire felt an unexpected wave of awareness, noticing details she had never allowed herself to focus on before, the way his face had matured, the seriousness in his eyes, the calm confidence that had replaced the awkward boy she remembered, and it unsettled her, not because of what she felt in that moment, but because she felt anything at all, and she cleared her throat, trying to anchor herself in normalcy, reminding herself of who she was, of her place, of the life she had chosen, and she spoke quickly, her voice softer than intended, explaining she had only come to drop off his clothes, that she didn't mean to interrupt, that she would leave right away, and Ethan nodded, standing up, apologizing for forgetting to lock the door, his words polite but his tone slightly strained, as if he sensed the same invisible shift she did, and as Claire turned to leave, she felt the weight of the moment settle behind her like a door closing too slowly, and she walked back down the hallway with a strange tightness in her chest, her thoughts moving faster than her steps, telling herself it was nothing, just an awkward mistake, just a shared surprise, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet house had noticed something neither of them had said out loud, and when she reached the kitchen and set the empty basket down, the silence no longer felt peaceful, it felt watchful, and Claire stood there for a long moment, staring at the counter, wondering why such a small thing, a door left unlocked, a laugh overheard, a glance held for a second too long, had left her feeling unsettled, as if she had crossed an invisible line without realizing it, and somewhere behind her, at the end of the hall, a door remained open just enough to let the light spill through. That night did not end when Claire walked out of the hallway, because moments like that have a way of stretching beyond time, and even as she moved through the house pretending everything was normal, her thoughts kept circling back to Ethan's room, to the look on his face when he saw her, and by the time David came home and dinner was finished, the quiet tension had settled into the walls, unnoticed by anyone but her. And later, when the house grew still and sleep should have come easily, Claire lay awake replaying the moment, telling herself it meant nothing, that people feel awkward all the time, that families have small uncomfortable moments, but the next morning proved how wrong that thought was, because when she stepped into the kitchen and found Ethan already there, pouring coffee, the air between them felt different, charged in a way she couldn't explain, and they exchanged polite greetings, simple words, yet both seemed careful, as if each sentence carried weight, and Claire noticed how Ethan avoided her eyes at first, then slowly met them, holding the look for just a second longer than necessary before looking away, and that second lingered, following her as she moved through the day, because it wasn't just awareness she felt now, it was curiosity mixed with confusion, a sense of emotional closeness that had appeared without warning, and as hours passed, small moments kept adding to it, like when Ethan held the door open for her and their hands almost touched, or when he asked about her day with a sincerity that felt deeper than usual, and none of it crossed a line, yet all of it quietly tested one, and Claire felt herself caught between who she had been for years and who she suddenly felt like, a woman seen in a way she hadn't realized she missed. And later that evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows and David worked late again, Ethan found Claire in the living room, sorting old photo albums, and he hesitated before speaking, his voice low, careful, as if choosing each word, and he apologized again for the open door, saying he hoped he hadn't made her uncomfortable, and Claire wanted to end the conversation quickly, to protect both of them from what she feared might surface, but instead she surprised herself by telling him it wasn't about the door, that sometimes people forget how much small moments can affect others. And Ethan listened, really listened, his attention focused on her in a way that felt intense yet respectful, and in that space between them, something unspoken grew clearer, not desire, not action, but understanding, and Claire realized she hadn't felt understood like this in a long time, not because her marriage was broken, but because it had grown quiet, settled, and comfort can slowly replace connection if no one notices. And as Ethan spoke about his uncertainty after college, his worries about the future, his fear of disappointing his father, Claire felt a pull of empathy, and empathy can be dangerous when it meets emotional closeness, because it builds bridges faster than logic can tear them down, and as the conversation ended, both felt it, the awareness that they had stepped into deeper emotional territory, even though nothing improper had happened. And when Ethan finally excused himself, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts, she felt a sharp twist of guilt, because she knew she should not be thinking about him this way, yet she also knew she couldn't simply erase what had started to form, and over the next few days, that tension followed them quietly, shaping their interactions, turning casual moments into careful ones, glances into questions, and silence into something heavy. And Claire began to understand that infidelity doesn't always announce itself loudly, it can arrive quietly, through shared words, through feeling seen, through the realization that emotional lines can blur long before physical ones ever appear. And as she stood at the kitchen sink one evening, watching the rain fall outside, she knew something inside her had shifted, and she feared that ignoring it might not be enough to make it disappear. Days passed, but the house never returned to its old rhythm, because once silence becomes heavy, it does not lift easily, and Claire felt it in every room she entered, in the way footsteps sounded louder than before, in the way time seemed to slow when Ethan was nearby, and she tried to manage it by staying busy, waking earlier, leaving the house more often, filling her schedule with errands and visits that gave her reasons to be away, yet avoidance only sharpened her awareness. Because even when Ethan wasn't present, she thought about him, about the calm way he listened, about how natural their conversations had felt, and that realization unsettled her more than anything else, since she had always believed that loyalty was not just about actions but about intention, and now she questioned her own intentions in quiet moments, while Ethan, on his side, grew more distant in visible ways. keeping his door closed, spending more time out, answering politely but briefly, as if he were building walls to protect both of them, and those walls hurt more than closeness ever had, because every restrained glance, every unfinished sentence, carried meaning, and Claire sensed his effort, recognized the respect behind it, which only deepened her conflict, since it reminded her that this was not a careless situation but a delicate one shaped by emotions neither had planned, and the tension peaked during an ordinary family dinner when David spoke warmly about the future, about stability, about how lucky he felt to have them all under one roof, and Claire smiled, nodded, played her role well, yet inside she felt a sharp ache, because she realized how far her inner world had drifted from the image she presented, and when she caught Ethan's eyes across the table, she saw the same discomfort mirrored there, a silent understanding that made her look away quickly, and after that night, sleep became harder, thoughts louder, and guilt heavier, because Claire understood something important then. Emotional distance in a marriage does not always come from lack of love, but from unspoken needs, and recognizing those needs in the wrong place can feel both comforting and devastating, and she wondered if Ethan felt the same weight, if he also struggled to make sense of feelings he never asked for. And the answer came one afternoon when she found him sitting alone on the back steps, staring at the yard, his posture tense, his expression tired, and something in her told her this silence had stretched far enough, so she sat nearby, leaving space between them, respecting boundaries even as her heart raced, and for a moment neither spoke, until Ethan finally broke the quiet, his voice low, steady but strained, saying they needed to talk, not to cross any lines, not to confess something dramatic, but to acknowledge what lingered unspoken, because pretending it wasn't there was making it worse, and Claire listened, truly listened, as he spoke about confusion, about respect, about feeling caught between gratitude for her kindness and fear of what emotional closeness could turn into if left unaddressed, and she felt a deep mix of relief and sorrow, relief that he saw the situation clearly, sorrow that clarity came with pain, and when it was her turn to speak, she admitted her struggle without excuses, saying she never meant to feel this way, that she loved her husband, that she valued family, but that something inside her had awakened unexpectedly, and admitting it aloud felt both honest and terrifying, because truth carries consequences, and as they talked, they agreed on one thing above all else: nothing could move forward like this, because emotional honesty demanded responsibility, and responsibility sometimes means choosing discomfort over desire, and when the conversation ended, there was no dramatic goodbye, no tears in front of each other, just a quiet understanding that the distance between them would now be intentional, necessary, and as Claire walked back inside, she felt both lighter and heavier, lighter because the silence had been broken, heavier because naming a feeling does not erase it, and she knew that the next choice would be the hardest one yet, because acknowledging a line is only the beginning. Deciding how far to step back from it is what truly tests the heart. The morning after their conversation arrived quietly, without drama. Yet Claire felt as if the house itself was waiting for her to decide what kind of person she would be, and she moved through her routine with careful attention, making coffee, opening curtains, grounding herself in small actions because big emotions had a way of clouding judgment, and when she saw Ethan at breakfast, they exchanged a calm nod. Nothing awkward, nothing warm, just respectful distance, and that distance confirmed what she already knew had to happen, because clarity had replaced confusion, and with clarity came responsibility. So later that day, when David returned from work early, Claire asked him to sit with her, her voice steady though her hands trembled, and she spoke honestly, not about Ethan directly, but about herself, about feeling disconnected, about realizing she had ignored her own emotional needs for too long, and David listened with concern rather than anger, because real marriages are built not only on love but on effort, and when she suggested counseling, he agreed, surprised but willing, and that agreement felt like a door opening toward repair rather than escape. And later that evening, Claire spoke to Ethan again, briefly and clearly, telling him she thought it would be best if he moved into his own place sooner than planned, not as punishment, not with blame, but as a way to protect everyone involved. And Ethan understood immediately, his face calm though his eyes carried sadness, and he nodded, thanking her for honesty, saying distance was the right choice. And that quiet maturity broke her heart more than anger ever could have. And over the next week, boxes filled the hallway again, but this time they felt heavier, because they carried more than belongings, they carried a moment that had changed them both. And on the day Ethan left, there was no lone goodbye, no emotional scene, just a shared understanding that some connections are meant to be acknowledged and released, not explored. And as he walked out the door, Claire watched him go with a deep sense of loss mixed with relief, because she knew she had chosen the harder path, the one that demanded restraint instead of impulse, and life slowly settled into a new rhythm after that. Counseling sessions opened conversations Claire and David had avoided for years. Honesty returned to their home, not instantly, but steadily, and while the marriage did not transform overnight, it grew more aware, more intentional, built on effort rather than assumption. And yet some nights, when the house was quiet again, Claire would pause in the hallway and glance at the door that once stood open, remembering how easily everything could have slipped into something destructive. And she understood then that infidelity is not always about betrayal in action, but about moments where choices still exist, where people stand at the edge of possibility and must decide who they want to be. And Claire had chosen to close the door gently, fully aware that it would never erase the memory of what almost happened, but it would allow her to live with herself. And sometimes that is the bravest ending a story can have.